Are the Phoenix Suns championship material?
Yes, they're championship material without a doubt. I think what separates them is not that they're, not the fact that they've won 9 straight playoff games, or that, they've got Book, or they've got DA, who's a much improved player, or really any of the actual X's and O's of basketball. I think what really separates them is they have this chemistry together where you can't really phase them. You can't really knock them off of, their mental game. And I think that's really what separates them. You notice that the Suns have never really been in a position where they're down like 25 to a team. You notice that?
Yeah.
You notice how they're always right there. Most games they're a little bit ahead. They're playing tight games, but they're never down by like 25. They're never like getting their ass handed to them. And that's because they play together and they execute their defensive scheme. And then from the defense, they then worry about offense. And I think that's what's really impressive about their team and the coaching job that Monty Williams has done. He's taken this team and said, okay, we're going to worry about stopping the other team first. And then from there, we're going to run our offense and do our thing and value people and, get in people's heads and do what we do. And that's why I say, yes, they are championship material. I haven't heard really anybody nationally giving the Suns credit for being anything more than a Cinderella story, and I just think there's so much more than that. They're more than, oh, hey, this is their first time in the postseason in forever, and they just got lucky. I just don't, based on what I see on the floor and in the chemistry they have, I don't see that it's luck or that they're just some kind of Cinderella story who's happy to be here.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the things that's really interesting is you win a game like that, and it feels like that championship moment.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that moment in time where you're always going to remember that play. And again, I really want to take some time and give a shout out to Deandre Ayton. As much as we have criticized DeAndre on this show, as much as we've talked about, he isn't a great defender. He doesn't catch the ball well. He's improved on all of that. He is, whether you want to talk about what happened in the Lakers series, you want to talk about, just the way that they've come along and come alive now. He has really, in my opinion, been a big part of why they've won 9 straight games. And you feel like now you're up 2-0 on the Clippers. This is a real opportunity to play for a championship. And the thing that I will say is that, again, with all due respect to the Dallas Mavericks, they were not a complete team. They were not a championship threat. They were never going to be as good as the Clippers, who at the time had Kawhi. The Utah Jazz are an incredibly flawed team. We know that. Defensively, they kind of came apart in the playoffs. That's not who this Suns team is. This Suns team is young, fast, athletic. They shoot the ball well. They're getting Chris Paul back on Thursday. By the way, I don't know how many people saw that, but it looks like Chris Paul should be good to go for Game 3 in LA on Thursday. Everything is breaking just right for the Suns. Now, having said that, this is not going to be easy. The Clippers have shown they're not going to lay down. I have no idea where Kawhi Leonard is right now. It apparently is not a torn ACL. It is a sprained knee. So there is this light potentially at the end of the Clipper tunnel. But, Jake, I don't think this series is over. I just don't see a way the Clippers can win 4 out of the next 5.
Well, again, I would agree with you on paper. Again, I would agree with you that it's highly unlikely that they're going to go ahead and beat this Suns team 4 out of the next 5 games.
Yeah.
That seems very unlikely to me. But what if we said that about the Jazz? And yes, I do think that the Suns are a more complete defensive team than the Jazz are. I think they have way more athleticism. No, they don't have Rudy, but I think Deandre Ayton is holding his own very much in this series on the defensive end, and he's rebounding the hell out of the ball. I want to say he had 16 boards last night or something like that.
Yeah.
So, he had a great night last night, and I think that the biggest thing, if you're the Clippers this morning at home, thinking about this is you're sitting here saying, okay, well, if Paul had made 2 free throws, we win the game, most likely.
How does he miss both of those?
I don't know, man. Before CenturyLink decided to screw us over, I had said that, I don't really care if Paul George has had a nice series shooting or not, or if he's good at the line or not.
You're absolutely right about that. It's inexcusable.
It's you're the best player on the team right now. You're the guy. You're playoff P. You got to make those. And even if you had split them, you're in a better position. So I can't get down with it. So you combine, if you're the Clippers, my point is you're saying to yourself, hey, we're 2 free throws away from being, tied 1-1. We're really not in that bad of a place.
And you were in position to win game 1. I mean, that was a hard-fought game as well. This tells you 2 things. The Clippers are much better than anybody gave them credit for. This is a really good basketball team.
Yeah.
And number 2, it tells you that these 2 teams are very evenly matched, but now you're getting Chris Paul back. And I think this takes a lot of pressure off of Devin Booker. Point Book goes away when Chris Paul's back. That mid-range game that has been lacking for Book, especially last night.
This team.
I agree, because Chris Paul is going to draw the Patrick Beverley assignment.
Yeah.
And that's going to move whoever onto Devin Booker. My guess is you're going to see Paul George on Devin Booker, because you've got to put your best player on their best player in that situation. And I think that's advantage for the Suns.
Yeah, I think the Suns, and this is why they're such a good team, because let's say that is how it breaks out. Let's say that's the defense that the Clippers choose to run at the Suns, where PG is on Devin Booker, Bev is on Chris Paul, and then you're matching up, everywhere else, however you want. Even at that point, the Suns are still going to figure out a way to get what they want. Devin Booker is still going to get his mid-range going. Chris Paul is still going to get his mid-range going. And I think the thing that, if I'm the Clippers, the thing that I'm really worried about is Chris Paul getting it going in the paint, which is going to draw Zubats out to the elbow, which is going to leave DA a lot more room under the basket. And doing that's just a recipe for disaster. So it'll be really interesting to see when the Clippers roll out the zone, when they roll out the matchup zone specifically that they rolled out against the Jazz, because that's definitely going to make an appearance in this series, in my opinion. And we'll just see how they handle it. But, yeah, I think this Suns team is the most complete team that they've played, certainly.
Well, and I think the pick and roll is going to be critical for the Suns. I mean, you're getting a guy in Deandre Ayton that I think is playing elite pick and roll basketball right now. The question will always be, where's that pass? Because if that pass is low, DeAndre is going to struggle to catch it. I think what you're seeing is the Suns are putting him in a position to excel. And that means getting him that pass up above the waist in space and allowing him to finish. The impressive part about DeAndre Ayton's game is that he's got a mid-range. He can play at the rim. He's got a hook shot. Like, he's got a full bag of tricks that is allowing him to really dominate this series in the paint. And if he's going to do that when Chris Paul returns, again, I just don't see the way the Clippers can win this series. And I am incredibly impressed with the way DeAndre Ayton has developed in the playoffs. Most guys shrink. He is growing. He is blooming. DeAndre Ayton, I think it's been one of the best stories of the postseason. And I think you have to acknowledge that. Suns Jam Session says, how about them Suns, elite pick and roll team that knows how to switch? Well, by the way, I think you're seeing that this Suns team is also much better defensively than most people gave them credit for.
Yeah.
Their matchup defense, their ability to pick up three-quarter court. I think, again, that little play where Mikal Bridges steps in and grabs that rebound on the second missed Paul George free throw, it tells you that Monty Williams and his staff are paying attention to details.
They're a disciplined team.
Yeah, they're doing the little things that championship teams do. And I understand, listen, the Bucks are a huge favorite in the East. I get it. The Suns don't have a guy that can match up man for man with Giannis, but who does? The Suns, if they get to the finals, and I think they will, that's when you're going to worry about Giannis. And I have all the confidence in the world that Monty and his staff are going to be able to draw up a scheme to handle Giannis as best you can. But right now, I think they're the best team going in the NBA playoffs. I think they're better than Atlanta. I think they're better than the Clippers. And I do think they're better than Milwaukee. So, yeah, absolutely. I think the Phoenix Suns are ring ready, Jake.
Well, and I think the whole thing about Giannis is it's not a secret on how to stop Giannis. I mean, the formula is there, just like it is with beating the Jazz. Like, all you have to do is build a wall to discourage him from driving the paint. And the way you do that is, I know I keep running the matchup zone thing out there, but that's how you do it. You play a matchup zone defense where everybody is essentially just surrounding the paint. And the difference between Brooklyn and anybody the Bucks have seen versus the Jazz is the Jazz have 5 guys that can match up with the Suns have 5 guys that can match up with with guys like Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. You know, Bridges can hang with either of those guys. Crowder can hang with either of those guys.
And they can play multiple. The Suns can play multiple styles of defense.
Yeah.
If you want to finesse and run, the Suns can play with you. If you want to get physical, Jay Crowder, Deandre Ayton, that's the other thing that Deandre's done is he's shown an ability to use his hips and shoulders to keep Zubats off his spot.
Well, last night's a perfect example of the Suns playing physical. I mean, again, was there any doubt that Booker was going to come back into the game and try to torch people? I mean, it didn't work out for him, right? Like, he didn't have that like 16 straight point run that we saw in game one, but he did come back and he did make big plays that weren't in the scoring sheet. So I just think that, you know, again, people didn't really want to listen to us on the Suns, but, you know, they're a complete team and they're coached really, really well. And when you do the little things in the NBA, man, does it bring you big-time results. So we'll see. Again, I also want to say it's 2-0. You won 2 games at home. Now we'll see what you can do in L.A. Based on what you did in Denver, I feel like you got a good shot to at least split in L.A.
I think you're exactly right when you say they haven't really done anything remarkable. They've had obviously the alley-oop and all that. The Suns have done what they were supposed to do. Essentially, they've paid their child support, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to give them a bozo button for winning at home. But real quick, on the home court advantage, how impressive is this Suns crowd? I mean, Phoenix is known as a transient market that does not have a passionate fan base for its home teams. We've seen it repeatedly with the Cardinals, repeatedly with the Diamondbacks, and we used to see it with the Suns. But what you're learning about Phoenix right now is that Phoenix is an NBA market. When that Phoenix Suns team is good, you have this beautiful new renovated arena. That place is full. It is loud.
I think that's that's one of the most underrated things the organization did is renovating the arena, because it used to not really be a comfortable place to go and watch a game. Like, we spent a lot of time in that place, and it was not.
It was dusty. It was dark. You had you didn't have, you know, like everything from bathrooms to concession stands, small concourses. Now it's a palace. Like, I think all of the consternation that those of us that were in Phoenix when this was all going through the city council and, you know, to redevelop the arena and all that consternation was well worth it now, because you have a great basketball building. The Suns have invested in talent. They've invested in infrastructure, and it's all coming out in wins now.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a huge part of this. If I had to guess, I think they go to LA. They probably win game 3. They probably lose game 4. And then, you know, we'll see how the series plays out. But if they get Chris Paul back, they're going to win game 3, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He is a former Clipper. He loves playing in that building. I think he loves sticking it to them. I absolutely, positively, if they get Chris Paul back, I think they're going to win game 3.
If you sweep the Clippers, that is going to be a
I can't
statement.
see that.
I don't see it either. I don't think they're going to sweep the Clippers, but I do think that Suns and 5 guys is sitting nice right now.
Driftwood says we need more calls for Dennis Lindsey's job. Him and Zanuck are out at sea in their jobs. We'll talk about Quinn Snyder. We had a huge discussion on Twitter about this last night. That's coming up. Jeremy Bolton says, morning, gents. What's up? Casey Finlinson says the Suns are fun to watch, but until games are played in L.A., I'm not going to be convinced. Absolutely agree. Brandon Whiteside says, Jazz played 4 games with Kawhi in the lineup. Suns should buy Ingles flowers for bumping into Kawhi. Probably a different series with Kawhi. Oh, there's no doubt. If Kawhi Leonard's healthy in this series, it's a completely different series.
Yeah, but they're doing it without Chris Paul. I just...
Yeah, that's absolutely an evener.
I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, man, the Suns are only here because Kawhi Leonard's not playing. I mean, you're talking about a team that's won 9 postseason games in a row. They went to Denver and kicked the hell out of the Nuggets. Like, I'm just not...
I mean, you've beaten the Lakers, the Nuggets, and now you're 2-0 on the Clippers.
I mean, you're dominating teams.
And by the way...
Come on.
Every team's had injuries. Hell, look at the Jazz, Donovan and Conley. Look at the Nets with Kyrie and James Harden. This postseason, one of the stories is going to be all of the superstars who are injured. So injuries are not. James Knight says, has Kawhi got the same injury he had before he left the Spurs? No. Kawhi had a mangled quad in his last year with the Spurs. And whether he was really hurt and couldn't play, who knows. But he had a quad injury. This is an ACL knee sprain now, is what everybody is saying. So completely different injury. But listen, there's no excuses to be made. To me, the Suns are the best team left in the NBA in the playoffs right now. They're playing like it. They've earned that respect. And I think they're going to go to LA and get a split. And if that's what they do, again, if the Clippers lose at home, there's no way they win this series. Giggity says, if ifs and buts, candies and nuts, if my aunt were my uncle, she'd have a D, but she doesn't, so she's not.
If you felt these balls.
Okay. A little awkward there. My bad. I like the Suns in 6 games in this series. I think the Clippers will get one at home, and then I think they will try to find a way to win one in Phoenix. But I like it to go 6 games. I wouldn't be surprised if it went 5. It will not be a sweep.
Yeah, 5 is what I'm going with.
You feel like 5, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's I think it's 5 or 6, but we'll see. I hedge because I don't know that Chris Paul's going to play Thursday. If he plays Thursday, I could really get down with 5. So we'll see what happens there. I do want to switch gears and get to the Jazz, though, because...
Head on a stake, world is burning down.
Yeah, the world's over. Fire everybody.
He's an assassin.
Now, thank you. Now, this is probably a moot conversation.
It's Shock Jock Radio.
Because if Dennis Lindsey gets fired, I think Quinn Snyder probably gets, thrown out with the bathwater. There is this conversation about firing Quinn Snyder because of what happened in the Clippers series. And, there was this huge thing on Twitter last night. There were 4 or 5 guys going back and forth. I think Eric and Raleigh was involved in that. There were just a lot of guys saying, like Tyler Kazir was the main guy, talking about Jazz D was predictable, drive, Rudy comes to the key every time, nobody rotates to cover his guys, and just talking about how Quinn Snyder made no adjustments. And so you get into it with Jazz fan about Quinn Snyder, and I just kept saying but it's true. Yeah, because I think when you look at Tyler's point, I just kept saying to Tyler, what adjustments do you want Quinn to make? He wouldn't answer the question. So I said, stop dodging. What lineup adjustment, what in-game adjustment do you want him to make? And Tyler went all off the rails and was like, oh, you're a jerk. You're an aggressive talk show host. Okay, well, that's cool. Tell me what adjustments you wanted Quinn Snyder to make. Because there is no Terrence Mann. There is no DeMarcus Cousins, Patrick Beverly.
Mikal Bridges.
Jay
Crowder.
Cameron Payne, Cam Johnson. There is no depth on this Utah Jazz roster. So tell me who you wanted him to play. You couldn't play Derek Favors. He was terrible in the Clippers series. Frankly, he was not great at the end of the Memphis series, right? You were without your 2 best players in Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley. Don was not the same guy. What adjustments did you want him to make? And I want to read this one tweet from Tyler where he says, don't quote tweet me like I'm some type of person who cares. I don't even know what that is quote tweeting all of a sudden like a crime or
Don't quote tweet me, bro. I'll kick your ass.
Like, what are you talking about?
I'll kick your ass.
He goes, Tyler Kazir says, Quinn doesn't deserve a pass. Injuries were a huge problem. Lindsey built no depth. Quinn did very little coaching. Watch the film. The passing lane was used over and over and over. Get in the way. Okay, so not to be the master of the obvious, but the adjustment that you wanted the Jazz to make was Rudy to defend the paint and have guys rotate. Well, you already are without Mike Conley. And when Mike came back, he was a 0, mind you. In Game 6, 0. He could not move. You saw his lateral movement was not there. His explosiveness was not there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, well, Rudy's going to go to the paint and everybody's going to rotate. Okay, well, who are you going to leave open? Are you going to leave Paul George open, one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA?
Nope.
No. Reggie Jackson, who's killed you all series long? No. Nick Batum, who's killed you all series long?
Nope.
No. Why would you leave anybody open that's not named Terrence Mann? Now, if you want to have a discussion about put somebody else on Terrence Mann, rotate Rudy over, okay, great. But what did we tell you when the when the Jazz went to LA in the regular season and lost? Because Patrick Beverley switched onto Rudy Gobert to pull him into the corner to hit threes. They don't have an answer for that because they don't have depth. They don't have athletic ability. If you put Rudy Gobert on somebody else, then let me ask you this. Who are you going to put on Terrence Mann? Who are the options? It's not Bogey.
Yeah.
It's not Rudy. It's not Joe Ingles. So you're going to put Royce O'Neal on Terrence Mann.
And then who do you put on Paul?
Who's going to guard Paul George?
Yeah, it's bad.
Donovan Mitchell on one ankle? Mike Conley on one leg? There's no adjustment to be made. So all of this idea that it's Quinn's fault, well, because this guy didn't step into the passing lane, you quote tweeting prick. Well, I got news for you. There's no such thing as step into the passing lane. You're rotating, you're moving. The Clippers used elite ball movement and drive and kick. The issue is the Jazz can't stand in front of anybody defensively because they're unathletic. That's not the coach. That's the general manager. So I'll just say again what I said yesterday. Quinn Snyder's my head coach. If I'm Ryan Smith, by the way, you've been quiet too long. Where the hell are you? I need to hear from you. We're going on a week of your season being over, and we haven't heard word one from you, essentially. Where are you? Where's Dennis Lindsey? Where is the future of this Jazz team? Because, again, I will say, standing pat 2 years in a row is what you always do. And if you always do what you always do, you're going to get what you've always gotten, which is you're going to get knocked out of the playoffs early.
Disappointment.
This is not rocket science. I just don't.
Are you sure? Because they're sure treating it like it. They're sure treating it like it.
It might. Somebody explain to me what sense it makes to fire Quinn Snyder. Like, okay, who's the best coach? Rick Carlisle's, by most people's opinion, the best coach available.
Right.
You bring Rick Carlisle in onto this roster, the wins don't get better. The games don't get better.
The car can't go faster without gas, dude.
No, the car can't go faster without a better motor.
Yeah.
You're trying to play a V10 team with a four-banger, right? Like, if you look at the way, how did the Clippers beat the Jazz? Dribble penetration and three-point shooting.
And defense.
And they took you out of your game. Now, the one argument I would have with Quinn Snyder is you became a team that fell in love with the three all year long. And, oh, my God, Bogey has 59 points in the first 3 minutes of the game. He's hit 26 threes.
Bojan.
And then it's over. He doesn't
Bojan Bogdanovic
was absent in the third quarter because this team falls in love with the three. But the other question is this really a team that can get up and down and run other than Donovan? Is this a team that you can get into the paint with other than Donovan? No, the answer is no. So, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been Ace or Mick or Mitch or whoever said, you got to stop saying Donovan and everybody else. This is a complete roster.
No, it's not.
No, actually, it's not. 45 for 45. Donovan and everybody else. That's not the coach's fault. That's the general manager's fault. That's Dennis Lindsey's fault. And if Ryan Smith leaves them here, I'll be incredibly disappointed. Because by the way, here's the other question. What is Dwayne Wade's job? What is he doing here?
Yeah, and I knew this conversation was coming at some point.
What's he doing here?
Bro.
Ryan Smith is not an NBA guy. He has no experience in the NBA. So you brought in a guy in Dwayne Wade. Are you telling me that Dwayne Wade is a minority owner, is not a guy that you're going to go to with heavy input? Multi-time NBA champion, like, he's here not to recruit. He's here to build a championship caliber team, which Dennis Lindsey's shown he's not capable of doing.
Yep.
Okay, I feel better.
Are you sure?
I do.
Okay, good.
I do.
Good.
What is Dwayne Wade doing here? This is an interesting question.
Yeah, I think Dwayne Wade, the move so far, frankly, has been a PR stunt. Frankly, I mean that's what it's been so far. Now, if they go ham on the front office and they get rid of Lindsey and everybody, and DWade becomes this like special advisor role, and he's telling you which way to go here and which way to go there, and you actually follow the direction. Because that's the thing. I mean, again, we talked about this so much with the Suns when they were bad, and Monty Williams had just recently gotten hired. It's like, the executives, ownership, and those guys, Those guys are good at making money. They're not good at basketballing, So you want to let the basketball guys do the basketballing. So that's what DWade should be doing here. But we'll see. We'll absolutely see. And I think that the Utah Jazz they put up a front as a great team, but in reality, they're a very vulnerable team. And that's what I think pisses Jazz fans off the most. This year, you got gutted emotionally because you were the number 1 seed. Everything's awesome. We're dominating teams. We're winning by 40 points on a pretty regular basis against, crappy teams. And then you get into the postseason, and you're playing the best teams in the league who you didn't beat in the regular season. And I got breaking news for you. You didn't beat them in the postseason either. Who's really surprised?
Yeah. It's not surprising because the NBA, as difficult and as complex as fans try to make it, the NBA is pretty simple. It is a one-on-one sport, and you have to win the athletic battle. And generally, the roster that's got the most athletic ability, the Phoenix Suns right now, they're going to win games. And when you look at the Utah Jazz, take any team that's left in the playoffs, the Atlanta Hawks, the Milwaukee Bucks. Certainly the Milwaukee Bucks are far more athletic than the Utah Jazz.
Yep.
The Phoenix Suns are far more athletic than the Utah Jazz. If you look 1 through 8 on that roster, and I think if you look at Deandre Ayton on his own, the reason that Deandre Ayton's a better player has nothing to do with how good Rudy is offensively. The simple fact is that if you're a big in this league and you can't create for yourself, if you don't have a repertoire of moves, if you can't play with your back to the basket, if your best offense and really your only offense with Rudy is rebounds and putbacks, you're going to struggle. And when you are a one-dimensional defensive player, that is Ben Simmons. Why is Ben Simmons in just so much turmoil? Because he has nothing other than a dunk. He missed a layup that was wide open the other day and then refused to even try and dunk a basketball the other day because he has no offensive game. And to me, you look at Bojan Bogdanovic, and again, I know that he's been a great player and he has contributed to you all season long. And the Denver game and the 48 points and all those threes against the Clippers in the first half, that's all well and good. But you can't disappear. You can't ghost your teammates, which he did. He disappears. He goes quarters without touches and scoring. And why is that? Why has Joe Ingles been so minimized on this roster? Because Donovan Mitchell doesn't trust his teammates. Donovan Mitchell knows that if he gives the ball up, that it's likely not going to go in the hole. The guy that you really look at in this situation is Mike Conley. And again, not to be a jerk about it, but your best ability is your availability. And if you're not on the floor, what good are you? How are you and Mike Conley really contributing to the way that the Jazz ended the season? Only in a negative light. So then next man up is Jordan Clarkson, who doesn't pass at all. How many times in the Clippers series did we see the Clippers force him to dribble drive? And he would get up in the air and have nowhere to go with it. Because what happens when you're unathletic? You don't move. You wind up standing there. And so Jordan Clarkson has nowhere to pass the ball because you're playing tight man defense if you're the Clippers, and you're going to step up and you're going to body Jordan Clarkson in the paint, and he had no way to finish that. That's not Quinn Snyder's fault. He's got a roster that's not capable of competing.
He's playing with one hand behind his back, man.
Good Lord. Driftwood says, why is it so far-fetched to think we could get a new GM that would love to keep Snyder? Because most GMs, and this is most entrepreneurs, business owners, whether you're in trucking or the NBA, you have your crew of guys. So as a GM, if I said to Rick Carlisle, hey, I'm going to hire you as the GM, who do you want to coach? It's going to take him less than a second to pull a name. He knows who he wants his head coach to be. Relationships are huge in the NBA. And so I would say it's not far-fetched to believe that you would hire a GM who would consider keeping Quinn Snyder. Furthermore, I would say if Quinn Snyder got fired by the Jazz, I have no doubt if he wants to coach next year, he would have one of the many jobs that are open across the NBA. There's no doubt in my mind about that. as I think Rick Carlisle will, because I think he's the best available coach. Quinn Snyder's a good coach, and I know that there's a certain sect of Jazz fans who will not appreciate that, will not appreciate him, who want him to teach his players to step into passing lanes.
It's one of the dumbest takes you could ever have, dude.
Do you really think Quinn Snyder doesn't teach defense? Remember, because this was an elite defensive team. You really think they don't talk defense? You really think that they don't talk about passing lanes?
Dude, the elite defensive team crap is just that. It's crap. There's no stat to back it up. Rudy on his own is an elite defensive player, but the amount of times that the opposing team gets into the paint to get high percentage looks is off the charts, man. I mean, again, I love Twitter tough guys, because Twitter tough guys, all they do is talk a big game, but they have no substance to back up their take. That's what they do.
So here's Tyler Kazir back into the conversation. He says, "Wade, I thought Quinn did a great job, and there's no chance he should be fired because he had no depth or athleticism, and nothing he did was wrong in the playoffs." Right? Who said that? I never said that. What I said was,
that's what they do. They try to twist your words.
Yeah, what I said was he has no depth. He has limited athletes. You can't name a lineup that's better than what's out there because there's not one. Ty Lue has 10 guys he can play. Big, small, inside, outside. Blame Dennis Lindsey, not Quinn. Which is exactly what I would say. It is, to me, you have to take your fandom out of it.
And that's exactly what it is.
And there's a lot of guys who can't, who can't name a better lineup.
Jazz fans want somebody's head on a stake after the way the season ended. That's just what it is, and I understand why it's frustrating. I'm not saying to not be frustrated or pissed off or wanting to fire people or whatever, but at the same time, don't blame people who aren't at fault. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that, if you go back and you watch the game tape and you nitpick through the game, you could say, hey, Quinn should have done this or should have done that. The problem that you run into by doing that is then you're simply sitting here saying that the job that Quinn Snyder did, getting them to the 1 seed with this limited roster, is null and void. It doesn't matter. Like, he didn't do a good job in the regular season either then, right? Like, you're literally talking about a guy who carried a team, or coached a team, I should say, to the 1 seed in the Western Conference with this roster. And you're pissed off because they were not able to beat a team who probably was at least time and a half, maybe 2 times deeper than they were in terms of player and roster construction and all that. I just don't think it's even close. I don't even know why this is a conversation. I don't know. I think Quinn Snyder is just an easy poster child for, hey, that's why the Jazz lost, because Quinn wouldn't do this. Whereas he doesn't have another option. The hole in that take, honestly, the reason that's such an embarrassing take is because stepping into passing lanes, that's not how the NBA works, dude. Do you seriously think that the Jazz aren't trying to cut off passing lanes? Like, do you seriously think that if they could step into those passing lanes, they wouldn't do it? Have you ever played a basketball game in your life? Even a pickup game.
Funny, Tyler said the exact same to me. You don't know anything about basketball. You ever played? Well, I've played my whole life. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but I've covered the game for 20 years. I've seen the absolute best teams in the history of the league play. In the 72-10 Chicago Bulls. I've seen the Golden State Warriors. I've seen the Los Angeles Lakers at their peak.
This Jazz team in person multiple times.
Like I'm telling you, arguing about the Jazz and saying that they lost because they wouldn't step into passing lanes is just foolish. I just don't.
It's an emotional take.
Yeah, it's making the argument that you should trade for Ben Simmons. Anyway, if you want to win a championship, you would fire Dennis Lindsey. If you're serious about winning a championship, you'll sweep out the entire front office. If you're serious about winning a championship, you will completely change the way you do business and talent evaluation. And if you're serious about winning a championship, you'll try to keep Quinn Snyder as your head coach because he is by far the least of your problems. I've never said he's perfect. I've never said he doesn't make mistakes, but he's your best available option. The players respect him. They like him. They play hard for him. but it's not Quinn's fault that he has a roster full of unathletic dudes.
All right, what's in the comments? What are people saying in the YouTube comments?
Let's see. Feeble the Man says a good coach would take Bogey off the corner and put him next to Mitchell, so when doubles come, Mitchell can pass the ball to Bogey instead of Royce, so you're putting Bogey in the position to score. Well, okay, so what I would say to that, Febo, is that Bojan Bogdanovic is not a guy that you put on top, because where can he go from the top of the key? Where can he go? Donovan at the end of the last several games in the Clippers series was not being doubled. What they were doing is they were pressing high, using a matchup zone at the top against Donovan, so that he always had a hand in his face. And they knew he couldn't lift and elevate, so they forced him to shoot from further, bigger distance. And what happened? He started shooting air balls. They didn't have to double him. They simply had to make his life uncomfortable. And if you put Bojan Bogdanovic at the top instead of, at the time, Joe Ingles, the thing that happens is you're asking him to do something that he's not capable of doing, which is break the paint.
Can I just ask a question real quick? Why are our Jazz fans so scared to admit that this roster is just short? Like, why is
I
that,
don't know.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Why is that such a foreign concept? Like, why instead of like Bogey shoots from the wing all the time, man. Like you're like, I respect your take and I understand like what you're trying to do there with that. But you're exactly right. The double wasn't happening anymore because they didn't need to double them. They had their way with them. I mean, I just don't understand why we can't just all agree to say, hey, we aren't as athletic as these other teams, and that put us in a bad position.
Correct.
Why is that so hard to admit?
Why is it so hard to admit that when the Clippers went zone, you had guys trying to dribble, penetrate who couldn't? And the only way to beat a zone, if you're the Jazz, is to have Donovan and Mike Conley. Look at what Conley did in the Memphis series. Consistently hitting the mid-range, the teardrop, getting into the paint.
Yeah.
That's what you missed. That you can't have Bojan Bogdanovic come to the top and give him the ball and say, please go get us a basket.
But again, missing Mike Conley, that's not on Quinn Snyder.
No.
What is Quinn like? It's not Quinn's job to keep guys healthy.
Why is Austin Rivers not a Utah Jazz man? Why was he not available to come off the bench when Conley got hurt? Because I doubt you ever called him. You had no depth, and you knew the point guard that you were starting was injury prone. That's not a Quinn Snyder problem.
Maybe they didn't. I mean, maybe we need to stop saying that. Like, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, we know he's injury prone. Maybe they didn't know. Like, maybe that just wasn't, like, maybe they just said, hey, like, you know, we don't think he's going to get hurt.
And listen, if you want to talk about getting Bogey more involved, why not post him up? I think we saw that in the Memphis series. I think we saw that at the end of the regular season. When you gave Bogey the ball out on the wing and he was able to back a guy down, he's very effective there.
Why would you not create the Bogey on Terrence Mann on the block matchup?
I mean, that there's your adjustment, and we've talked about this on the show. That's the criticism that we have of Quinn Snyder. I don't believe he did enough to force the ball to Bojan Bogdanovic on the block, because I think Bojan down there was very effective. Jackson says Jazz need to attack the rim. They were doing it in the first half of Game 6, then didn't in the second half.
With who, though?
Under pressure, their comfort level is shooting threes. And when you're playing in a high-stakes, high-pressure moment, you almost automatically revert to what you're comfortable doing. The Jazz are comfortable shooting threes. Cody Strickland says, no Ben Simmons. F that guy. He's a chump. Jeremy Bolton says, LOL, I can't believe there are people who want Simmons. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Like, Jazz fans want to, like, hey, let's do a sign and trade. Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, and your mom for Ben Simmons. Really? You think Ben Simmons and Rudy? No. By the way, the Sixers aren't doing that. There's a guy named there's a guy named Joel Embiid in Philadelphia who doesn't match well with Rudy Gobert. Just saying. You know, like it's amazing to me. Driftwood says the Jazz crumbled to good teams all season long. They did. Red Heart Norvis says, I like Rick Carlisle. He had an Indiana Pacers team similar to the Jazz team, unathletic shooters back in the early 2000s, can make magic with Don and the Jazz crew. I think the early 2000s were totally different.
Again,
totally different.
Dude, and I love you, bro, and I love all you guys. Let's stop saying he can make magic with Don and this Jazz crew. You don't have a crew.
We've heard that like a ton over the last week.
I am sick and tired of hearing this go both ways. So on one hand, it's, oh, this is a complete roster, right? This is what I love. Oh, hey, it's a complete roster. You guys are idiots. On the other hand, it's Don and the crew. So which is it? Is it Don and everybody else, or is it a complete roster?
Yeah.
And this is why I say you got to take, and I know you've been saying this, and I'm not trying to copycat, but I agree. You got to take your fandom out of this, dude. Like, you've got to look at this roster and say, okay, if Donovan Mitchell gets hurt, now what? Now what? Now what are you going to do? Because if Donovan Mitchell gets hurt, you're done. It's over. You're not beating anybody without Donovan Mitchell with this current roster and the way it's set up. And we saw that on full display. The guy was out there on one leg. Like, he might as well not have been out there. I mean, I know he was giving you 25 points, and that's great and everything. But it's the way he's giving you the 25 points. Is it 25 points of hero ball? Is it 25 points of actual high percentage looks and then another 10 assists and you're getting Bogey involved and Clarkson and all these guys? Like, this roster, let me put it to you this way, and this is going to piss you off, but it's the truth. There's a reason you're not playing basketball right now.
Yes,
let me put it that way. If you truly are a Jazz fan and you believe that the Clippers got lucky, or that, you know, that there was something else at play other than, hey, your roster is not as good as somebody else's roster, you're just up in the night. I mean, there is a reason that you went home. It's because your roster is not as deep as the Clippers. Like, I don't know why that's so hard to understand.
Yeah, it's not. Jeremy Bolton says, what's it going to take to get the GOAT, Mike James, to the Jazz? If Mike James was on this roster, you don't think you'd be in a better spot?
No, I don't think people believe in Mike James.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm good with it. The Jazz are in sync, and if that doesn't change, Mitchell is going solo. Exactly right. Cody Strickland says, Robin Lopez is a non-bird free agent. Thoughts on him? He's priced out. I mean, he's probably going to get $12 million. And by the way, I don't think Washington's going to let him go.
You don't need another big, dude. You don't need another big.
I think you need another power forward.
Yeah, but
the ability to play smaller. I don't think you need another true center. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you do need the ability to play smaller, but you again, let's not forget about the cap situation. I mean, you have to trade guys like Bogey. You got to make moves here to, in my opinion, get younger and get more athletic. Because let's not forget, you know, Jingles is in his 30s now. You know, I mean, he's well into his 30s now. I don't know Bogey's age, but I know he's up there.
By the way, so is a guy like Robin Lopez, I think, is 33.
Yeah, you know, so it just is. I don't know, man. The whole thing is frustrating, and frankly, if they don't get rid of, you know, Dennis Lindsey, it just tells you where they're at, and you're going to continue to be disappointed.
Yeah, and I would remind you that free agency is not going to be how the Jazz get out of this. They are so landlocked cap-wise. They have so much money tied up in Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And I will just say their most tradable player is Bojan Bogdanović and Royce O'Neal. And if I'm the Jazz, I'm making a move for both of those guys.
And by the way, also to that end, this coming season, and we said this on the show yesterday when we were talking about the cap specifically, the Lakers are going to be better. The Clippers are going to be better. Like, the Warriors are going to be back. I don't know if anybody saw it fly under the radar. Klay Thompson's back on the court doing full basketball activity.
Yeah, how about that video?
And he feels good.
Woo-hoo.
You know, so like I'm just telling you, this was the window of opportunity for you. And if you run this same lineup out there, you're not going to be a 1 seed. You're going to be a 4 seed.
Yeah, I think that you're going to be very hard pressed. And you know, Cody Strickland says, by the way, to answer you guys on yesterday, Dante Exum is on the Rockets. Okay.
Well, I'm glad somebody figured it out because I didn't have time to go digging for where he wound up.
Yeah. Dennis Lindsey saw Donovan Mitchell when no one else did in the draft. Okay, cool. I said yesterday.
Whoa, he did not draft.
No, but he traded for him.
Yeah.
And I mean, flipping Trey Lyles for Donovan Mitchell is highway robbery. That was well done. That's Dennis's one real claim to fame. But I mean, I'm not going back into the draft. I'm not. Mick says, I just can't believe that we're talking about tearing a roster down that just won the best record in the NBA.
It's a gimmick. It is a gimmick, bro.
Well, and what I would say is your core is here. That's why I think trading Rudy Gobert is kind of a ridiculous idea. If Rudy Gobert's your biggest problem, I think you're probably in good shape. But he's not your biggest problem on this team. A lack of athletic ability around Donovan Mitchell is your biggest problem.
You're in one of the most difficult positions as a sports franchise can be in, whether it's basketball or any other sport. You're the Green Bay Packers, dude. You're good enough to get to the NFC Championship game, but then you get that ass handed to you by Tom every year. You know, like you're
by Tom.
Like that's who you are right now. You're not good enough to go to the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
But you're good enough to be in the postseason. I understand the comment of, I can't believe we're talking about tearing down a roster that won the best record in the league. Well, why did you win the best record in the league? Because you played what I like to call a gimmick offense. You shot threes, and a lot of them, and you tried to play the percentages. You tried to say, hey, by shooting enough threes, by shooting enough volume, we're going to make enough shots to win the game. And the problem with that is when someone takes that away from you, you're done. Where do you go?
Yeah. Cody Strickland says, wow, Mike James is only on a $9K contract. No, I think Mike James is on a veteran minimum, and I think he made 40 or 50,000. But the point was Mike James came out of CSKA Moscow and essentially was a free agent.
It's a low risk,
and
high upside deal.
And Mike James went to Brooklyn because he's very close friends with Kevin Durant's brother. And Kevin Durant went to the Nets and said, hey, we ought to sign this guy if we can. And Mike James was willing to take a $40,000 contract for 4 or 5 weeks to play for Brooklyn. And now I think they have an option on him. I'd have to look it up, and I can look up his deal. But I think they have an option on him, like a $2 million qualifier for next year because they guaranteed his salary.
But even still, $2 million, like that's nothing.
Yeah, he's 31 years old, and he has a qualifying offer of $1.89669 million.
I mean, that's the kind of deal you want on your team. Like
Yeah.
a guy who can do things, like can do a lot of different things for you. When he gets it going, he's a great scorer.
Yeah,
you
he's
know?
a great scorer, and and I think Steve Nash talked about this. The reason they want to bring him back in Brooklyn is because he really gave them tenacity off the bench.
I mean, like the reason this drop even exists is because of like Mike James. Do we realize that?
The rack attack!
I mean, he was in the middle of the rack attack highlight.
Yeah, he should have laid it up, but he threw it off the backboard to Kevin Durant. Like, I mean, Mike James fit in perfectly there.
Yeah.
Like, and the one thing that you have when you have that many superstars, guys like Steve Nash is your head coach, and you have those 3 guys on your roster, you need somebody who won't shrink in that moment. The guy I'm curious about is Joe Harris. Like, what happens to Joe Harris now? Because he really did not play well at all. And it just, anyway, it is what it is. I regret bringing up Mike James. You probably should. One of the things I also think is interesting is that there are guys out there, you just have to have relationships in place to get them. And it's one of the other things that I question about Dennis Lindsey, who, again, he's going on his 10th season as the head of basketball decision-making for the Jazz. And you have no point guard depth. You had no relationship. You have no – I'm shocked by the lack of movement from this team.
Yeah.
It is absolutely stunning. If you'd had – what if you would have had any of the big-name buyout guys, Blake Griffin – Andre Drummond would have been a great backfill to Rudy Gobert. Like, what if you had just landed one of those guys? Just one. Not all of them, just one. Austin Rivers would have been a huge difference maker. That's how close you are, and I hope you realize that as Jazz fans. You were right there, and your inactivity killed you.
Yeah.
That's what should stand out to you. Chris Paul completely changed the fortunes of the Suns. You were that close. That's what hurts just so badly. And I agree with Jackson. The DWade era has begun. I think he's a minority owner. He's going to have considerable input on this offseason.
I hope so, man. I want to be clear. I want to see this team make moves and get better. I'm honestly, like, I want to see them become a true offense. I don't. I call it a gimmick offense because that's exactly what it is. It's not an offense. It's a, hey, let's shoot a bunch of threes and play the percentages.
Let's break off the fast break. To shoot a three.
Like, what are we doing?
That's
dude?
what this Jazz team was.
Man.
Joshua Lovering, good morning, Coach. He says Jazz should sign Spencer Dinwiddie. I love Spencer Dinwiddie, but that's an $18, $19 million player.
And it's an injury risk.
You know,
it's a high-value contract with a high lot of risk.
And he's coming off of a major knee injury.
It's a mini Mike Conley deal.
By the way, he's 100% cleared to play basketball now. But I think he made 10 last year, and he's going to be in high demand. Spencer Dinwiddie's probably going to get...
I love him as a player. I agree with you 100% that he is a phenomenal player. But I just don't think... with where the Jazz cap is at, that they can financially or from a basketballing perspective absorb another, hey, $18, $20 million a year guy who's on the injured list.
You're gonna have to make trades to do this. I'm telling you.
Yeah.